As children, most of us were fascinated with dinosaurs. But as we get older, we realize they're all gone. But what if I told you there are 5 species of dinosaur that never went extinct? Thanks for watching. My name's Adam. This is Informal History, where we dumb down history, but it's still fun and informative. And with dinosaurs, I think that everybody wishes they were still around. And most people think, well, everything from the dinosaur era is totally gone. But that isn't true. And today we'll have Tilly the frilled dragon as my co-host, because she kind of does look like that frilled dragon that tried to eat Newman in Jurassic Park, right? She does have the frills. It's very, very good looking dinosaur. Now, the Mesozoic era was the age of the dinosaurs, and it ended about 66 million years ago because of, well, their theory is volcanic eruptions and then a giant asteroid that smashed into Earth in the Yucatan Peninsula, basically a part of where Mexico is in present day. The Mesozoic era was divided into 3 different periods. So first was the Triassic, then the Jurassic, and then the Cretaceous. The Cretaceous was the one that ended 66 million years ago, and then we entered our own era, which is still going on today. And as these periods started to go on, first starting in the Triassic to the end of the Cretaceous, there was a huge evolution in all life, but especially dinosaurs. So much more primitive, all the way to what we know and seen in Jurassic Park. And this mass extinction wiped out about 75% of everything living on the planet, but there still is a few remnants of days gone by, the dinosaur era. So let's get started with number 5, Crocodilians. Now this is one that's going to be unsurprising on the list, but I think you'll be surprised by the rest of the list. Crocodilians look like dinosaurs, what we think dinosaurs look like. And in fact, crocodilians are older than some dinosaurs. Crocodiles, as we know them, emerged 95 million years ago. Well, not really as we know them, but pretty darn close. The first primitive crocodiles started 95 million years ago, while the full evolutionary story is about 240 million years ago, so even before dinosaurs, crocodilians first started to emerge. It should be stated, in this video, these aren't real dinosaurs that didn't go extinct. They're things that lived with dinosaurs or during the age of dinosaurs. And of course, there has been some evolution. So no, crocodilians or anything on the list aren't exactly the way they were, but they're pretty darn close, and we're not getting too far removed from what they actually were. Some crocodilians can live over 100 years, and unlike dinosaurs who increased their growth rate as they evolved, early crocodilians slowed their growth rate. This means they didn't need to eat as much. So when a apocalyptic event happens and something needs to eat all the time, crocodilians are immune to at least this portion of why a lot of things died out. There are some crocodile species who might eat once a year if they're lucky. Some crocodilians eat far more regularly. It just depends on the species, and we'll get into that. Today, there are 3 families of crocodilians. Alligators, there are 7 species in 4 genera. Crocodiles, which have 14 species of 3 genera. And then gharials stand alone. So gharials are probably the most primitive looking. They're one of my favorite animals on the planet. Absolutely amazing. Endangered, unfortunately, but they stand alone. There is nothing with them like there is in the alligator and crocodile families. And there's a huge range, as you'd expect, something that's evolved for so many million years. For example, some saltwater crocodiles can get over 20 feet and be tons and tons of weight. They're huge. Then there are dwarf caimans, which are a species of caiman, which is in the alligator family, that sometimes only get to 4 or 4.5 feet at full grown. So it just depends, but it's really interesting that we have crocodiles and alligators basically everywhere where it's warm enough. Number 4, the duck-billed platypus. Sort of. Let's just talk about monotremes as a whole. A monotreme is a type of mammal that lays eggs, and of them, there are 2 still living on Earth today, echidnas and platypus. And researching this video was interesting because I didn't know that platypus and echidnas come from one common ancestor that was kind of like an echidna. Echidnas started to emerge between 20 and 50 million years ago, and then the platypus, as we know it, started to emerge between 19 and 48 million years ago. So this is obviously a huge range and doesn't fit in the dinosaurs. But there were echidna-like monotremes in the age of the dinosaurs over 66 million years ago. So, although the two that we have now have split from a common ancestor, that common ancestor likely looked very much like today's echidna, with similar proportions, similar body structure, and those were around in the same age as the dinosaurs. There were also other mammals living, like marsupial shrews and things like that. Most people don't know that. They think mammals happened much later than the dinosaurs, and although most of them did, not all of them. So no, the modern day echidnas and platypus weren't around at that time, but modern day echidnas and platypus have been around for millions of years. They're one of the oldest of all the mammals that are still looking exactly like they did that long ago on the planet today. Number 3, cassowaries. This is a cassowary, and if you've never seen one before, you probably think, well, this just looks like a dinosaur anyway. Well, it kind of is. It looks like one. Of course, birds were the only type of dinosaurs that lived the mass extinction 66 million years ago, and that's a whole other discussion. If that's confusing, I get it. That could be a whole episode on its own. And although cassowaries in their form right now didn't evolve until about 50 million years ago, they come from a common ancestor that also descended from was emus and ostriches and things like that. But cassowaries are by far the most prehistoric looking. They're the coolest ones and probably the most aggressive of all the flightless birds. They're known to attack humans, and those 3-toed talons that they have, which look very much like the appendages dinosaurs used to walk on, could split you in two. If a cassowary ever chases you, put your bag in front of you because they will disembowel you and not feel bad about it. Now, they're not the biggest bird on the planet, they're the 3rd biggest, and they can run really fast. If you want a picture of what dinosaurs probably looked like, sounded like, and moved like, there's very few things on the planet as close as a cassowary likely. Of course, these are theories. Nobody was actually around in the age of the dinosaurs. These animals come from Australia, New Guinea, Indonesia, that area of the world. And they have that really cool casque on their head, which is also very dinosaur-like. We think a lot of other dinosaurs had a casque like this. Why do they have them? Well, that's up to some debate. Some people think it's to accentuate that bellow. Their call is booming and sometimes so low of a frequency, humans can't hear it. It also might be for heat dissipation, because we see that in a lot of reptiles today. And at over 5 feet tall and 175 pounds, this is a formidable force, and I can't even believe these things still live on the planet. One of the coolest things in the world, and of course, although not exactly like they were in the age of the dinosaurs, very similar and very unchanged in comparison to how most evolution has happened over that long of a period. Number 2, sharks. This is unsurprising. We've all heard the old adage, sharks are older than trees. In fact, sharks first started to appear in the fossil record, or we think they started to appear about 400 million years ago, which means they're older than the oldest dinosaurs, true dinosaurs. Of course, there's a long evolution, and this could be a whole series, but more or less during the Jurassic period, there was a giant influx in the amount of species evolving from a common ancestor. So there was a whole bunch of different shark species during the Jurassic period. During the giant extinction event, a lot of those went away, and most of the shark species that survived were ones that didn't need surface temperatures to be very warm and could go into the deep for long periods of time and only ate things like fish, which were in the same depths of the oceans. But some species remain very similar to the way that they were before. Some are almost unrecognizably different in comparison to what we think they would have looked like before. Other species of sharks, like the hammerhead shark, are relatively new. Hammerhead sharks first started to evolve or become what they are now around 23 million years ago. So in terms of sharks, they're kind of the new kid on the block. And now we have so many species of sharks. We've got some sharks that grow less than a foot, really tiny sharks. And then we have whale sharks, which are the giant, monster, massive fish, the biggest fish that there are on the planet. These fish can be over 50, 55, almost 60 feet and weigh tons. Over 14 metric tons to be exact. In a whale shark, you'd think, oh, well, that's a big fish. It must eat big prey. It must eat other sharks and whale. No, it doesn't. It eats krill and jellyfish and fish eggs and things like that. In fact, there are places in the world, such as the Persian Sea, which gets very warm, where whale sharks in the month of August, when it's the warmest, will go into this waterway by the hundreds and start ingesting tons and tons of fish eggs. That's what they're after, this giant fish, the biggest fish on the planet. That's what they want, is fish eggs and things that are nearly microscopic. Not quite microscopic, but very small prey items. And number one on the list, one of the coolest things to ever walk the earth, and probably the most interesting animal still breathing today, the Tuatara. Now this looks like a lizard. This looks very much like this animal here. If you put them side by side, you can see that the head structure is very similar. The body structure is very similar, but there are differences. This guy here has external ears. It has a different skull structure. The third eye isn't quite as developed. There are many things that make them different. And Tuatara are not lizards at all. In fact, they split from lizards and snakes over 250 million years ago. They are the only one of their order. There are snakes, there are lizards, and then there is the Tuatara. That's it. They have nothing else even similar on Earth. This animal is from New Zealand. They grow about 2 feet long, although they can be bigger. And much like you'd expect from something otherworldly, these guys can live over 100 years. Although 60 years is what we estimate their average lifespan is, there has been some in captivity that have lived over 100 years. In fact, Henry, who lives at the Southland Museum and Art Gallery, was 111 years old when he first fathered his first babies. Likely the first ones anyway. We don't actually know if he fathered any in the wild, but the mother was 80 years old, so they are reproductive very old, and that's for good reason. They take almost 10 years or maybe sometimes longer to reach sexual maturity, where something like a frill dragon, which is what I have here from Indonesia, they'll reach sexual maturity in a few years. In fact, some lizards, which they aren't by the way, like say leopard geckos or crested geckos, can reach sexual maturity in as little as 6 months for males, 9 months for females. So this is very uncommon in terms of reptiles. I know most of you are here from that channel, but if you don't know, I have a reptile channel. You can watch it right here. No external ears. Their teeth are connected to their jaw bone more similarly to how a bony fish has their teeth connected than a lizard. And also they have teeth that are protruding and attached to the palate of their mouth, which is very common in ancient reptiles, but not common right now. And although they're not exactly the same as they were 250 million years ago, the first fossils that we find that look basically like what we have now in the world were about 190 million years ago. So the Tuatara has evolved a little bit, but very little in comparison to everything else in the last 190 million years. It might be the closest thing we have to an actual dinosaur. Of course, these aren't dinosaurs, they are in a different family and class in this whole thing, but either way, if you want to know what primitive animals that aren't even around on the Earth look like, Tuataras are kind of that. So let me know in the comments section below. Do you want part 2 because there are more? Did you know these things? What's your favorite prehistoric animal that still lives today? Let me know in the comments. Please do hit subscribe. And because I do videos every weekend, that means I'll see you in the next one.